Russell Wilson officially responds to being benched for the final 2 games in Denver. He gives us his side of the story. That and so much more in this episode. If you're new to this channel, my name is Ben, and I break down all things Denver sports. It really helps me out if you like and subscribe. So while it's really popular right now to pick a side, whether you are all team Sean Payton and Russ is cooked and that was the worst deal in NFL history, and you're so glad he's gone and we should have done this a long time ago, or your team Russ and like Sean Payton never should have come back after Bountygate and Broncos never should have signed him. I think there's definitely truth in the middle. I think two things can be true at once. I think two people can be at fault at once. And really in this video, I want to kind of give evidence both ways, hear from y'all. What do you think after hearing from Russ today? Was this the right decision? And I want to end on a really positive note of the playoffs aren't out of question. And there are truly scenarios that I think are likely. Like right now, we technically only have a 5% chance of making the playoffs. But if things play out how I would just like naturally pick them to play out for these next 2 weeks, the Denver Broncos are in the playoffs. And are we in the playoffs with Jarrett Stidham as our quarterback, or are we going to have Russ? Like there are so many things to dive into. I'm super happy to have you along for the ride. So diving in first, one of the things I wanted to dive into is there's a sense of doom and gloom, and I've felt that at times too, of like hearing about just how high the dead cap hit is going to be. As a real quick recap, if Russell Wilson walks because we cut him, we do not find a trade partner to absorb his huge contract that we guaranteed him that hasn't even started yet. If that is to happen, the Denver Broncos are going to have $85 million that they are not allowed to spend on anyone else over the next 2 years. And they get to decide if they want to take that $85 million as a punitive hit next year and really have like $85 million less than you can pay. Plus, we don't have a starting quarterback in Russell Wilson, or do we want to spread that out over 2 years? And at first I was like, oh my goodness, how are we going to ever even be competitive? Because that number seems massive, and it is massive. But it is very encouraging to see how other teams have navigated huge dead cap hits. This is from a website called overthecap.com. And just looking like Philadelphia Eagles, until this huge 49ers uptake where everyone's odds-on favorite of coming out of the NFC, they still might. And look, they are $63 million over the cap this year. You look at the Los Angeles Rams, who are coming on strong, who just won a Super Bowl. They're paying a quarterback who wasn't there anymore. They're paying a receiver who wasn't there anymore, and they have $80 million this year in dead cap money. And still, you look, if you hit in the draft like they did with Puka Nacua or whoever that guy is, and you have the right people in place, dead cap is not necessarily the death nail in a team. And I know it's really popular to pile on Sean Payton and to not believe in him anymore, but we gotta believe in him. Like, he won a Super Bowl with garbage owners in New Orleans. He won against Kansas City for the first time since Peyton Manning, 7 years. He won in Buffalo for the first time since like I was in high school. He broke the streak of losing on the road against AFC West opponents and beat the Chargers. And so I just think, while it's really popular to pile on him, and I don't love how he's handled things, and you see the media piling on him right now, I do believe he is the right man for the job. And I think I'm really excited for what he can do, even with a dead cap hit of $85 million. And I think the big hope ultimately is that that isn't the truth, that there is a way that we can defer that $85 million by kicking it on to the next team who takes a chance on Russ, or might Russ do something to help us out? So the other thing that I think, again, is important to look at here is it's, again, one of the popular notions right now is that somehow like Russell Wilson is a victim in all of this. And even I put out a poll the other day, like, are you more optimistic, pessimistic, or just sad for Russell Wilson? And by far the biggest sentiment after Russell Wilson's benching was sad for Russ. And I think this is an interesting thing to see, of like, Russell Wilson is not a victim. He's walking away with 11 wins and $142 million. So I think you could embarrass me in front of the whole world. You could make fun of me. You could make me into memes of me crying or anything. If you give me $142 million, I'm no longer the victim. And so I think that's also an important thing to keep in balance here as we're kind of examining this and what we think about it. So interesting thing is, as we talk about, is this Russell's fault? Is this Sean Payton's fault? Is it somewhere in the middle? This was an interesting thing that came out today, was that former defensive back Ryan Clark came out, just trashed on Sean Payton, just said some really, really mean things about him, said that we need to hold Sean Payton to professional accountability. The interesting thing was, the year before, under Nathaniel Hackett, on his very show, Get Up, Ryan Clark said Russell Wilson should be out of the league. So it's just interesting to me that, like, you can't really take what those shows are saying seriously, because they wishy-wash more than anyone else. So when Russell's bad, and it's easy to go with the narrative of, like, Russ is cooked last year with Nathaniel Hackett, get him out of here, it's his fault. He said that. Now this year, all of a sudden, it's Sean Payton's fault. So that's a thing to take with a grain of salt as you look at this. But the interesting thing that has come of this was that with this tweet is that our boy, Reamboy25, which is Kareem Jackson, former safety for the Denver Broncos, came out and said the truth, like kind of seconding what Ryan Clark said. And then Randy Gregory also came out and said all facts. And so you had a lot of people piling on and just saying, like, hey, look at these former Broncos defenders don't like Sean Payton. Russell Wilson doesn't like Sean Payton. All of that kind of trying to paint Sean Payton as this villain. Well, interestingly enough, as soon as that started making the rounds, what you saw was Kareem Jackson hit back at one of the reporters, Zach Stevens, one of my favorite DNVR guys, and just said, hey, stop making drama. What I was liking was Sean Payton or Ryan Clark's comment about how above board and how impressed with Russell Wilson's handling of the situation is. So I don't think the locker room has given up on Sean Payton, and I think we're all going to see that on Sunday as the Denver Broncos absolutely lay it on the Los Angeles Chargers. I think it's a 5. I think we're 5-point favorites now. I would be very, very, very surprised if Jarrett Stidham doesn't throw for at least 308 yards. That is, Russell Wilson threw for 308 yards in a loss against the Washington Commanders earlier in the season. And I think Sean Payton knows that Russell Wilson only broke 300 twice this year. And how many times? Drew Brees did it like dozens of times, right? Probably every season did it like 12 times or something like that. And so I think it is going to be very intentional that you will see Jarrett Stidham throw for over 300 yards both of these next two games. Next super interesting thing, Russell Wilson finally spoke, and this isn't us relying on what one of his PR people tweeted or what someone liked or any of that. Russell Wilson actually spoke. I encouraged you, and I'll drop it in the show notes here. Go watch it. It was fascinating to just see him in that light, not up on his podium, ending with a let's ride, but like a really humbled Russell Wilson sitting in front of his locker, just like a normal dude, just talking to a bunch of reporters. Is about 8 minutes long. And the most interesting thing to me was Russell Wilson, like over and over and over, talked about how he wanted to be back in Denver. And one of the reporters followed up, hey, would you do anything in your contract so that it's easier for them to bring you back? Essentially what he's saying is, hey, would you do what Peyton Manning did? Or right before he won the Super Bowl with us, Peyton Manning took a massive pay hit and made all of the guaranteed money, made him incentives, which he hit. Tom Brady, famous for that. Even Brandon Marshall, who everyone thinks is a me guy, the former Broncos receiver, took tons of pay cuts to play with winning teams. And I've said this over and over. I like Russell Wilson. I have his jersey. My son has his jersey. One of my daughters has his jersey. I love him. He cannot win a Super Bowl as the highest paid player. He's getting paid like he is, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes, like he's Lamar Jackson. And I think in reality, he is a middle of the road quarterback. And he certainly is better at this stage than Peyton Manning was when he won the Super Bowl. But the big difference is Peyton Manning was not a top paid quarterback at that time. So we were able to fill out that roster with talent around him so he could win a Super Bowl. So very interesting here is that Russell Wilson basically said no. He's like, no, I'm, despite the fact that I'm married to a recording artist, I have the biggest house in all of Denver. Winning is not as important to him as that payday. And so Russell Wilson, all of this really does come down to money. And I think what Russell's camp has tried to do, Russell's camp has tried to say that this is about canceling a injury insurance policy. But what Denver has said is, no, this was an ask to reopen your contract and renegotiate parts of your contract so that we could make a plan moving forward to keep you here. But Russell Wilson's like, no, you signed that. We're sticking to it. And so I think that is really, you just look, there are tons of players who I really respect on this list who Drew Brees even took a team-friendly deal so that they could build around and win. And I think that speaks a lot that Russell Wilson came to the Broncos on a Hall of Fame bubble, right? He was right on that edge that he'd won one Super Bowl. He was the fastest player in 10 years to have the number of wins that he had other than Peyton Manning. And he was on that Hall of Fame bubble. And these past 2 years, he has played himself out of that. And I think if Sean Payton and George Payton are able to put San Francisco 49er talent around him, that he could make it to another Super Bowl, that he could be playing deep into the playoffs, that he could be on a Super Bowl run. But with how much we're going to have to pay him, that's just that's not possible anymore. And Russell Wilson said he is not willing to do that. By not only by completely dodging the question, I encourage you go watch it for yourself. He completely dodges the question. They say, would you be willing to negotiate? He said, you know what I'm really focused on is next week. And it's like, well, dude, you're not even playing next week. So that's not what you're focused on. Well, you just answer the question. So by not answering it, that means no. And by the fact that this all started after right around the bye week when the Broncos approached him about opening his contract and making it work in the future. And part of that was an injury guarantee. But what you read is part of that also was going to be renegotiating just the overall number. And he was not willing to do that. I thought this also was a really, really interesting thing was that it's really trendy as well to say that it's our offensive line that are causing Russell Wilson all the trouble. But if you look at Pro Football Focus, which was like a bunch of dudes in the basement who are really good at analytics and stuff like that, and they have scored all the Broncos offensive line. We've heard all year long we're the most consistent offensive line. We're the only offensive line still in football who has had the same starters every single game. So we have continuity there. And we are the 7th best offensive line in football, yet Russell Wilson is one of the most sacked quarterbacks. And another thing that they broke down was that the bulk of Russell Wilson's sacks this year have been self-created, meaning that the pocket was good, that he spun into pressure, that he didn't see an open man when they were there. And so they credit or they fault the sack to Russell Wilson. So all this to say that I don't think all the blame lies with Russell. I don't think all the blame lies with Sean Payton. I think it certainly is in the middle. I know it's probably a lot better for clicks, a lot better for my channel if I were just to come out and be like, Sean Payton's the worst or Russell Wilson's the worst and attract people that way. But I think in Broncos country, we are a lot smarter than that. And we know that the truth is in the middle and that we need to find a middle path out of this. And last thing I want to leave you with is we got a lot about this game this week to break down still. But like I teased at the start of this video, the playoffs are still very, very, very much in sight if the Chiefs lose out, and they are going to have a hard time this week against the Bengals. And then can we please just count on the Chargers to help us out one time? Like, let's all just hope that happens. Let's hope all the pressure in a must-win game is on the Chiefs and they lose out there. If that happens, we're playing the Raiders for the AFC West, and that is just crazy, crazy talk to even think of. But with that path off the table, let's not even go there. Let's look at what would have to happen this week and next week for us to make it in. So there are still a bunch of options. Like if the Jaguars lose out, which is highly unlikely knowing that they play the Panthers this week, but there are multiple pathways that way. But this is the one that has the least amount of upsets. And this is the one where if I just gave you a blank piece of paper and said, pick the next 2 weeks of football, these are probably what you would pick anyways. And if it happens, the Broncos are in the playoffs with Jarrett Stidham. So we need to beat the Chargers. It's going to happen. Seahawks at home against a reeling Steelers team. Seahawks, they get Geno back from injury. Pete Carroll, we know that home field advantage is unreal. We need the Raiders to beat the Colts. Pittman is injured, probably hurt. We see the Raiders just absolutely surging under a new coach. Texans get CJ Stroud back, get a bunch of players back from injury, and are playing the Titans with a backup quarterback in Will Levis. And then Chiefs against the Bengals. So this right here, none of those things, if those happened, you would be shocked about, right? Well, then let's look to next week. We beat the Raiders, which that is going to be ending a streak of losing to the Raiders, which Sean Payton's broken a ton of streaks, and I think he's going to continue to do it. The Ravens should beat the Steelers. The one caveat on that is, what if the Ravens have the one spot locked up? They have the bye locked up. Might they sit some people here, knowing that that's a division rivalry, more likely to have injuries? That one scares me. So let's hope that the Dolphins keep the pressure on the Ravens by winning next week. Dolphins beat the Bills. That absolutely should happen. Texans beating the Colts. Again, that absolutely should happen. CJ Stroud, we've seen him. He's good. And then Titans beat the Jaguars, knowing that their quarterback has an AC joint injury, has a high ankle sprain. None of that is that crazy. So do not lose hope. Also, do not sleep on Jarrett Stidham. I just challenge you all right now, as soon as this video is over, will you please go watch highlights of Jarrett Stidham and the Las Vegas Raiders against the San Francisco 49ers last week, week 15, I believe. It is like, you're like, wait, that's our quarterback? Like, it makes you truly excited. The way the ball leaves his hand, it's like, it is coming out hot and it's exciting. I'm very, very excited for what we have in store for us on Sunday. Broncos country, we're united in orange. Let's ride.